In this lesson, we're going to look at one more way of factoring. This way of factoring is when you have a polynomial with 4 terms. And this method is factoring by grouping. The first step in factoring by grouping is to group your terms together. You want to group your first 2 terms together and your last 2 terms together. So in the example to the right, you would group together x to the third, 7x squared, and then group together 2x plus 14. Once they're grouped together, you're then going to find the GCF for each binomial. So when we take a look at the example to the right and take a look at our first group, our GCF would be x squared. Remember, when finding the GCF of your variables, the variable has to be in both terms, and you take the smallest exponent. What we have left is x plus 7. Then we factor out the GCF in the second set. The GCF of 2x plus 14 is 2. And what we have left is x plus 7. After you factor out the GCF in both binomials, the GCFs become one binomial, while your remaining binomial becomes the other factor. So it would look like x squared plus 2, your 2 GCFs. So taking these 2 GCFs and putting them together to make one factor. And then your other factor would be the x plus 7, because it's the same in both binomials. And just like our other ways of factoring, you can use the FOIL method to check it. So first, outside, inside, last. And you see that you end up with what we started with. Let's take a look at just a few examples. Number 1, I see that I have a binomial with 4 terms, and there's no GCF, so I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to group together my first 2 terms and then my last 2 terms, and then pull out the GCF of each term. The GCF of the first one, 3x cubed plus 15x squared. Looking at my coefficients first, the GCF of 3 and 15 is 3. And then looking at my variables, the GCF between x cubed and x squared is x squared. So what I have left is x plus 5. Then I'm going to factor out the GCF of my second binomial, negative 2x minus 10. My GCF here is going to be negative 2. And when I factor that out, I'm left with x plus 5. Remember, when we factor it out, what we get in parentheses is the result of dividing each term by the GCF. So the 2 greatest common factors become one binomial in my answer. So 3x squared minus 2. And the other factor is x plus 5 for my final answer. And again, you can FOIL it to check your answer. Number 2, I have a polynomial with 4 terms. There's not a greatest common factor that I can factor out, so I'm going to factor by grouping. Grouping my first 2 terms together and my last 2 terms together. Then I'm going to factor out the GCF of each of those groups. The greatest common factor of 8x squared plus 12 is 4x. Dividing to get what I have left, 8x squared divided by 4x is 2x. And 12x divided by 4x is 3. Then I'm going to factor out my GCF of 2xy plus 3y. My GCF there is just y. And what I have left is 2x plus 3. My two GCFs can be put together to make my first binomial, 4x plus y. And then my second factor is the 2x plus 3, because we have the same binomial for each one, giving me a final answer of 4x plus y times 2x plus 3. Go ahead and highlight on this page number 3 through 8. And then on the next page, go ahead and highlight number 9, and let's take a look at number 10. So number 10, I have a polynomial with 4 terms. There's not a greatest common factor that I can factor out, so I'm going to factor it by grouping my first 2 terms together and my last 2 terms together. Looking at the first group, my greatest common factor there is a squared. And what I have left is a plus b. In my second group, I can factor out a GCF of a positive b. And what I have left is a plus b. Putting together my 2 greatest common factors, a squared plus b becomes my first factor. And then the a plus b that's the same in both becomes my second factor. And don't forget, you can FOIL these 2 factors to check your answer to make sure you get what you started with. Go ahead and highlight number 11 and 12.